Get ready to be jolted out of the ordinary and into a world where conversations are charged with intensity and facts. The Lightning Strike Talk Radio with your host, Mohammed Faheem, broadcasting live from the heart of the city on Chicago's Progressive Talk Radio, WCPT 820 AM. Welcome to a radio show that charges through the airwaves with an electricity like no other. Here's your host, Mohammed Faheem.
Good morning, folks, and welcome to the Lightning Strike. Another beautiful day in the United States of America. But I wanted to talk today about a couple of things that you keep on hearing. Our leaders, our so-called leaders, use euphemisms, okay? Boots on the ground. Heard that term recently? Boots on the ground. And the bill is on the American people. This is the Lightning Strike. So Washington has a phrase, folks, that it likes to use when it wants to make war sound less dangerous. Boots on the ground. It sounds technical, right? Strategic, almost abstract. But let us be clear about what that phrase actually means. Those boots have bodies attached to them. Those bodies belonged to American soldiers. And those soldiers have families waiting for them to come home. When the government says boots on the ground, it is announcing that American men and women are about to be sent into battle. And the question we must ask is very simple, folks. Why? Because this war with Iran is already draining America's treasury and destabilizing the global economy. I'd spoken a couple of weeks back about the cost of this war and what we could have done with the money locally at home over here. So military operations on this scale now can cost close to $1 billion per day, right? Once aircraft carriers, missile defense systems, logistics, and air operations are fully engaged, if the conflict continues for months, the price tag could easily climb into tens of billions of dollars, potentially approaching or exceeding $100 billion. So when the broader economic disruption is included, that is American money, money borrowed against the future of us, the American people. And let no one tell you otherwise. This money could rebuild bridges, modernize schools, strengthen the healthcare system, and invest in the infrastructure of this country. Instead, it's being burned in a conflict that is also reshaping the global balance of power. So while Washington escalates militarily, Russia is positioning itself as a diplomatic broker in the region. Who could have thought about that, huh? Not the geniuses in the White House. So China continues expanding its economic and energy partnerships across the Middle East. In other words, while America spends its treasure and risks its soldiers, others are quietly expanding their influence. And then there is another question that deserves to be asked openly, okay? If this war continues, is it fundamentally about the security of Israel? Why are American soldiers being asked to carry the burden on the ground? Why are we hearing about American boots on the ground while Israel, with one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world, is not committing large ground forces into this conflict? These are not anti-alliance questions, and nobody dare question me and accuse me of being anti-Semitic. These are questions of national responsibility, folks. American foreign policy must always begin with one principle. American lives must never be treated as expendable instruments of someone else's strategic objectives. Our alliances matter, but alliances cannot mean that the United States automatically supplies the money, the missiles, and now the manpower. If American troops are being sent into harm's way, the American people deserve a clear explanation of the national interest at stake. Not slogans, not emotional appeals, strategy. And strategy means asking, how will we end this before it becomes another endless war? The path forward is not escalation, folks. I like to point out problems, issues, but I also like to give some suggested solutions that maybe those people at the White House and are not thinking about it. First, the United States must define limited objectives and stop mission creep before this turns into another multi-year occupation like we had in other so-called wars, right? Second, Washington must open an immediate diplomatic channel involving regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and the European Union, creating a framework for de-escalation. Third, the United States should re-establish structured negotiations around nuclear monitoring and regional security guarantees, restoring the type of diplomatic architecture that once reduced tensions. And finally, Congress must reassert its constitutional role before the nation drifts deeper into a war that the American people never fully debated. Because the real cost of the war is never measured only in dollars, folks. It is measured in lives. And every time Washington talks about boots on the ground, we must remember the truth beyond those words, right? Those boots belong to somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's future. And the decision to send them into battle should never be made lightly. This is the Lightning Strike. We'll take a quick break and come back on the other side of the break with our person of the week. We are also going to be joined by two congressional candidates in the first hour today. And in the second hour, we have Nick Unijewski, who will be joining us. And also Judge John Pavich will be joining us in the second hour. But let's take a quick break and come back on the other side of the break. You're listening to The Lightning Strike. I'm your host, Mohammed Faheem.